Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we are transporting ourselves way back in time. The year is 1947, and the location, Los Angeles, California. Now, when we think of 1947 LA, we immediately picture a city of unparalleled glamour, right? You know, the bright Hollywood lights, the massive movie stars, those huge golden age studios. But what we're going to uncover today is that right beneath that brilliant, sparkling surface existed a really shadowy, dark underbelly. And honestly, nothing brought those hidden shadows into the light quite like the case we are looking at today. It's a mystery that has completely gripped the American imagination for nearly 80 years, perfectly blending Hollywood dreams with literal, real-world nightmares.
So, Los Angeles, 1947. That is the time and place of a brutal, truly shocking crime that captivated the entire nation. We are, of course, talking about the murder of Elizabeth Short. This wasn't just some local tragedy. It became an absolute cultural phenomenon, a media spectacle, and a terrifying puzzle that defied some of the very best investigative minds of the era. So today, we are going to meticulously unpack the confessions, the prime suspects, and the massive web of lies that have kept this incredible mystery alive and completely unsolved for decades.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the discovery.
We've got to start at the grim beginning here. The date was January 15th, 1947. On a really crisp morning, a young woman's body was discovered in a vacant lot in Los Angeles. And the condition of the crime scene was, well, it was truly unimaginable. The body had been completely bisected, meaning it was literally cut in half, completely drained of blood, and then posed in this incredibly grotesque manner. The hardened detectives of the LAPD arrived on the scene, and these were men who had seen the absolute worst of human nature, right? But they were utterly shocked. It was a crime scene unlike absolutely anything they had ever encountered in their entire careers. But amidst all this unimaginable horror, we can't lose sight of the victim. Elizabeth Short was just 22 years old. She wasn't just a sensational headline. She was a real person. She was an aspiring actress originally from Massachusetts who had traveled all the way across the country to California. She had hopes, she had big dreams of making it in the movies, just like thousands of other young people who flocked to the city every year.
But, instead of finding fame on the silver screen, she found a very different, much darker kind of fame. The newspapers very quickly dubbed her the Black Dahlia. Now, this wasn't a name she ever used herself. It was totally fabricated by the press, inspired by two things: her reported fondness for wearing dark black clothing and a super popular film at the time called The Blue Dahlia. This nickname is absolutely crucial, guys, because it marks the exact moment this tragic murder case began its rapid descent into pure, unadulterated sensationalism.
Moving right along to Section 2, a national media obsession.
The crime scene was horrific, for sure, but the reaction to it was entirely unprecedented. Because of the theatrical, staged nature of the crime and that catchy, mysterious nickname, the story didn't just stay in LA. It completely exploded. It became front page, above-the-fold news in newspapers all across the country. Literally everyone was talking about the Black Dahlia. And this really highlights the sheer power of the press to shape a narrative. On one hand, you had the media portrayal, painting her as this dangerous, mysterious femme fatale just to sell papers. They dissected every single detail of Elizabeth's personal life. But in reality, her friends knew her simply as a struggling young woman, desperately chasing stardom, just trying to make ends meet in a really tough city. The press coverage completely distorted her reality, basically turning a tragic murder into a national obsession. Which brings us to Section 3, the flood of confessions. This massive media frenzy didn't just hurt Elizabeth Short's legacy, it actively, seriously hindered the police investigation. When a case is blasted on the front page of every single paper, it does something super weird to the public psyche. The police were suddenly inundated. Honestly, it was like, instead of looking for a needle in a haystack, the media had essentially dumped 1,000 fake needles onto the pile. As a result, over 50 different people, scattered all across the United States, came forward and falsely claimed responsibility for her murder. Just think about that for a second. 50 people walking into police stations or calling in, demanding to be arrested for a horrific crime they literally did not commit. This staggering influx of false leads completely tied up police resources, forcing detectives to waste precious time vetting absolute lies.
And this wasn't a case that just flashed and faded either. The body was found in January 1947, but the investigation dragged on for years. 2 years later, in 1949, major accusations arise against a man named Connors. Fast forward all the way to 1955, 8 full years after the crime, and we are still dealing with major headline-grabbing confessions, like the one from Von Hiltz. The investigation was just constantly haunted and constantly derailed by these bizarre claims over the course of an entire decade.
Let's actually zoom in on that 1955 date for a minute and look at a drifter named Ralph Von Hiltz. This guy literally just walked right into a police station in Chicago and told detectives a highly specific story. He claimed that he didn't act alone, but rather that he helped a sailor named Daniel James kill Elizabeth. He alleged that the sailor shot her first and then commanded Von Hiltz to do all the rest.
He even gave police this completely chilling quote, claiming the sailor yelled at him, "Go ahead, cut her up." It's a horrific, vivid detail, right? Well, like so many other things in this case, it completely fell apart under police scrutiny. Detectives investigated the claim, realized it was entirely fabricated, dismissed his story completely, and ended up charging Von Hiltz with nothing more than vagrancy. Just another massive false lead taking up everyone's time.
All right, let's shift gears to Section 4, Hollywood suspects and theories.
Because Elizabeth wanted to be in the movies, it was pretty much inevitable that the investigation would turn toward the entertainment industry. So I want you to act as a detective with me here as we step back slightly to 1949. The police spotlight firmly shifted onto a man named Jeff Connors, who was a Hollywood bit player and a freelance writer. And this really illustrates the absolute mess the LAPD was dealing with. We have Jeff Connors, who gets accused by a bellhop named Leslie Dillon. Dillon claims Connors revealed intimate details of the crime to him. Connors says, "No way, I'm innocent," claiming he was working over at Columbia Studios. His ex-wife Grace Allen even supports his alibi. But then we look at the fatal flaw. Connors points to a dancer named Vicki Evans, claiming she's his former wife and can vouch for him. And as for Leslie Dillon, well, he's actually a suspect himself for knowing way too much, but has to be released for lack of hard evidence. It is a crazy, tangled web of contradictions.
And what about that dancer, Vicki Evans, who Connors relied on so heavily for his alibi? When reporters finally tracked her down to verify his story, she delivered an absolute bombshell. She said, "I never heard of the jerk." It is almost darkly comedic, isn't it? In one single sentence, she abruptly and completely destroyed Jeff Connors' alibi. Now, these massive contradictions made Connors look incredibly suspicious to the police, but again, without physical evidence tying him to the actual scene, they just couldn't make an arrest.
But wait, what about the bellhop Leslie Dillon, the guy who accused Connors in the first place? His involvement was incredibly bizarre. He actively wrote to a police psychiatrist detailing specific, unpublished facts about the murder, things that literally only the killer or someone very, very close to the case should know. This led police to a truly wild theory. What if Dillon had a split personality? Investigators genuinely theorized that Jeff Connors wasn't just a suspect Dillon knew, but was actually Dillon's own violent alter ego. It sounds exactly like a movie script, but it was real police work. Ultimately, though, without hard proof, Dillon was released back into society, though his claims successfully reignited the public's obsession with the case all over again.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, an enduring unsolved mystery.
Now, you might be wondering, with all these suspects, what about the physical evidence? Well, during the grand jury phase, an LA newspaper reported a massive break. Investigators had allegedly found blood-stained sheets and clothing in a room right near the vacant lot where the body was discovered. This was a critical piece of evidence, suggesting she was killed in very close proximity to where she was ultimately posed. Yet despite this evidence, despite the bizarre letters, and the 50-plus confessions, no suspect was ever charged. Not a single one. Every confession collapsed under the weight of scrutiny. Every alibi dissolved into mere rumor or was violently struck down. The investigation, despite having leads that seemed so incredibly promising, permanently hit a brick wall, turning the Black Dahlia into the ultimate cold case.
To summarize the sheer scale of this tragedy, consider this. From drifters in Chicago to actors in Hollywood studios, sailors to bellhops, the Black Dahlia case drew in suspects and false confessors like moths to a flame. Tragically, this case also marked a dark turning point. It became the first in a horrific series of unsolved murders of women in Los Angeles during that specific era. And now, nearly 80 years later, the truth of what really happened on January 15, 1947, remains completely hidden from us.
Which leaves us staring at one final, haunting question. Who killed the Black Dahlia? We may literally never have the definitive answer, but the enduring legacy of Elizabeth Short's murder serves as a chilling, permanent reminder that beneath the golden age of Hollywood, beneath the studio lights, the cameras, and all that glamour, lay a profound darkness that absolutely no spotlight could ever erase. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really hope this gave you a clear, structured look into one of America's most perplexing mysteries. Until next time, keep questioning everything.